And here on the main stage, I will call to stage also from the United States, Josh Howell. So he can take care of the collaboration equation. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Chris. Good to see you. Good to see everyone. Good to see you, Jim. I'm going to take care of the collaboration equation. What do you think of that, Jim? Let's take care of that. So hi, everybody. My name is Josh Howell. I'm currently in the role of the president for the Lean Enterprise Institute here in the U.S. And I'm thrilled to be joined for this discussion with an old friend, Jim Benson. Jim, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Jim Benson. I'm part of the faculty at LEI. I have a company called Modus Cooperandi, an online school called Modus Institute. And today we're going to be discussing this book, the collaboration equation, that book too.
This book, also this one. Cool. So let's see. So Jim, I think you and I first met, if memory serves me right, over a beer in Seattle, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
For those that I've had a chance to meet there in the audience, I spent 9 years in my career working for Starbucks Coffee Company, where I was introduced to Lean. So I guess the reason to be in Seattle probably had something to do with that. Mm-hmm. That's where we met. But I think we really got to know each other a handful of years ago while working together on a project, I guess a series of projects. With Turner Construction here in the United States, specifically the group that was based in New York City. It was an awesome couple of years. And that experience, you drew from quite a lot in putting together this book,
Right.
Collaboration Equation, filled with many learnings from throughout your career. Maybe a place to just kind of get our conversation started, Jim, would be for you to provide an overview of the book, since it was just recently published. Probably folks in the audience have not had a chance to read it yet, but let's give them kind of a peek inside.
Okay. So the collaboration equation book itself is based on the premise that we have individuals and they are in teams and they create value. And I had actually started writing this book before Josh and I started working with Turner Construction. And the first day that we were there, I said to Josh, "Oh my God, I can't finish my book." Because it was so clear that working with that particular company, they had a very special culture. They had a very special focus on not only solving problems, but providing what they called the right environment for solving those problems. So the book itself looks at what collaboration means for us as individuals, what it means for us as teams, and then how we provide value, obviously. And it lays out some very specific ways both to collaborate as a team, to prepare individuals for being able to collaborate, and for building cultures of continuous improvement, like actually focusing on the culture itself and not just hoping, frankly, that it exists because we will it into existence. So there's some really practical tools in there about how to be a leader and do that, how to be an individual contributor and do that, and how everyone gathers together to build things.
Cool. So one thing that I guess when I first when I first took a look at the book, so this is the second book, I think.
The fifth book.
Fifth book for you. Fifth
Yes.
book. Okay. Second that I've read. But one thing that was kind of interesting. So this is authored by Jim Benson. Your previous book, Personal Kanban, was authored by Jim Benson and Tony Ann.
Yep.
Maria. So we've got the collaboration book, authored by Jim Benson only.
Right.
The Personal Kanban book, co-authored by Jim and Tony.
By two people. Yes. Yes. Life is run on the engine of irony.
Yeah, fair enough. So one thing, I was looking kind of in preparation for our conversation, like what would be some, I don't know, I guess what's in the book that kind of defines like the problem you're trying to solve, a problem that I think folks out in the audience might relate to, and come to the book with. From near the end, I kind of want to read something that seems to be sort of that statement, and then you can elaborate or whatnot. So you say, they're on page 292, towards the end, I want people to stop wasting time, energy, money, and themselves fighting for no real reason. In every step of my personal journey, I've worked with and in teams who are abused by anti-collaborative systems, intentional or indifferent. That seems to be sort of the problem you're trying to solve.
Yes.
So maybe elaborate a little bit on some of those things that you've seen. What is an anti-collaborative system? What are the things that we might all relate to in that sense?
So there are some anti-patterns in the book, or what I call collaborative worst practices, that almost every company tends to engage in. One is a belief that leadership is a role and not a responsibility. So everyone in a company has the responsibility to engage in leadership when necessary. And leadership is basically, you see something that needs to be done, you have a skill set that will allow that to get done, and you engage that. So in the book, I give some examples of, again at Turner, one of the examples is two very young women, brand new to the company, changed the operations of an entire department simply because they wanted the department to work better. That was a leadership action. Another thing that happens frequently is the company or parts of the company will be structured in a way where certain professionals aren't informed at the time that they need the information in order to make a good decision. They make a bad decision or a suboptimal decision because they're not informed, and then they get blamed for it. They're held accountable for those actions. But the company itself was actually willfully, or at least structurally, withholding that information from people. So they didn't have what they needed to get done, what they needed to get that thing done. And I could go on from there, but those are two really good examples that would just jump out at me, where we often set up silos, or we set up career paths that make people behave in ways that are less than professional, less than collaborative.
So one of the things, Jim, when we met forever ago and then had the chance to work together over those years, I think one of the things that I've always really appreciated about kind of how you approach this work that we do, sort of your source of motivation, kind of your starting point, which I think which I relate to very strongly, is just this notion that, I don't know, for a lot of us, all of us, at least at one time or another, our work experience just kind of sucks. So in those anti-collaborative systems, that was certainly a feeling that I had as a younger man, working for Starbucks Coffee Company, where I was first introduced to these ideas. I was primed to learn about lean, to try using lean thinking, because I was extremely frustrated. I didn't know why. I didn't have language or concepts or whatever to explain what was frustrating to me. But I knew that I was frustrated. And so here came, sort of the promise of lean thinking as described by these folks that were introducing it to me, that seemed to suggest there would be a way out, which I was all too eager to do. Anyway, I think that, I guess I was probably in those anti-collaborative systems. So you offer in the book 5 principles for collaboration. Could you walk through those with us and perhaps elaborate a bit on, especially the give a damn one? I think that's my favorite.
The give a damn one. Well, we'll start with the give a damn one while I find them in the book here. But years ago, it became very clear to me that many people in leadership literally just didn't care, and that was contagious. And when people don't care, they tend to do things like call up a consultant and say, can you sell me a box of lean? Can you come in and inject me with a dose of Agile so that everything will get better? And then they go off and play golf or hang out with their friends or Xbox or whatever it is that they're doing. And they don't actually go in to do the work that's required to set up a real culture.
Hmm.
And we engage quite often in practices like that have really nice sounding titles, like servant leadership, where the goal of servant leadership is, you aren't going to be a jerk to the people who work for you, but the expression of it I see most often is just being an absentee landlord. It's like, oh, you guys go off and self-organize, and then you leave the room. and so we'll come in, Tony Ann and I will come in to do workshops with people, and we see all of these, line workers, if you will, whether it's in software or healthcare or government or whatever, and you're looking around for the leaders, the management, and they're not there. And then you go ask them and they say, well, we wanted to make sure that everyone had a safe space to talk.
Hmm.
And we're like, well, if they don't have a safe space to talk, if you're there, don't you think that's a problem? Don't you think that we should work with that? And so giving a damn, the story that I tell in the book about giving a damn is, there was a guy that we both worked with at Turner named Charlie, and there was a problem on a job site that was actually rather dire. It would have crippled the project if it kept going on.
Yeah.
And rather than going in and yelling at everybody, go fix that problem, he picked one or two, again, level 1 people, new people to the company, and then taught them not just how to do A3s, not just how to go to the Gemba, but how to be a professional when approaching people and saying, we have this problem, we want to work on it together, we want your help. And he didn't do their work for them. He let them make some mistakes. And by the end of that, the one gentleman who was really doing most of that work leveled up way beyond how much he would have leveled up over 6 months of just being at the company, because he had such a deep interaction, not just with like how to do construction, but how to relate to other people.
Yeah.
And so Charlie gave a damn about him and taught him to give a damn about other people. And for me, it's like the other ones, there's a lot of, there's 5 of them, as you mentioned, but the one that I can just go on and on and on about, because it encapsulates the other ones. It encapsulates respect.
Right.
It encapsulates focus. It encapsulates visual systems. It's kind of the catch-all for them.
And that story, Charlie, you're referring to Charlie Whitney, we both know, Randy being the engineer that he was supporting. You write about that story very beautifully in the book, sort of near the end.
Moving for me.
It's an incredible story. In fact, it's one that we were fortunate enough to at LEI to set up a webinar with Charlie 6 months ago or so, where he tells a little bit about the experience with Lean in that business unit, and then specifically tells that story in his own words. I think you've written about it. I know you have in the book, even I think separately on a blog maybe, but I've written about it too. It's a wonderful story of, like, I think to your point, part of your point, it's a wonderful story, sort of embodying like the thinking and the structure of that A3 process. In fact, I remember when he gave that webinar presentation, and he had slides, that he was referencing. Someone in the audience was like, show us the A3, or wanted to see the A3, the piece of paper. And it was, essentially his response was, well, this whole story was the A3. And, it was there, but that A3 just kind of having a sort of a deeper meaning. There's incredible cases in the book, 2 that, I guess 3 or so that I'm quite familiar with. You talk about Kevin Chase and his work in the procurement department at Turner. You talk about the Coney Island project outside of New York, and then others that I didn't experience with you.
Mhm.
If I'm not mistaken, Jim, when we were working together, I remember you saying at one point that you were writing a book about endeavor. Endeavor was your word.
Yes.
And the book that you wrote and published, collaboration is the word.
Okay.
Our principles and everything. I'm curious, what
There's a separate book called Endeavor.
book?
I
Okay.
wrote it. I gave it to my editor and my business partner, and they both looked at it and said, "I don't get it."
Oh.
and actually, so right now I have any number of books in flight because
Yeah.
I can't stop typing. But the notion of endeavor for me was that we see this big difference between successful groups who are working together, they're learning, they're getting a project done, they're focused, they're engaged in an endeavor. We go into other places where people are like, I don't want change, I got this figured out, shut up and leave me alone. They are engaged in work.
Mm.
So toil is fundamentally different than endeavor. And we all say, I get up in the morning and I go to work. Very few of us say, I get up in the morning and I go to endeavor. But what I find is when groups are collaborative, when they have a strong idea of what it is that they're building, they have a strong idea of what they don't know, and they respect that they're going to go to work and they're going to learn something, that is an endeavor. And so that's what that book was about. And now that this one's done, maybe I can go back and revisit it and write it in a way that doesn't make them go, huh?
You can return to the endeavor.
Yes.
Well, you speak to it. That word is used actually in the introduction. So it's sort of remembering that, having that memory, and it sort of suggested that perhaps there was a big pivot. But there's also a different framing. From the perspective of endeavor versus collaboration.
100%.
So interesting that you're exploring both of those things. There's a really funny way that you begin the book. I think the first sentence, where you say, like all process geeks, I worked at Toyota, but then that's scratched out, and it's replaced with I was punk rocking in Omaha, Nebraska.
Grand Island, actually.
Grand Island. That's right.
Omaha had people in it.
Yeah, fair enough. I think you remember this. I spent my ages 3 to 9 in Fremont, Nebraska, which I think has fewer people in it than Grand Island, if memory serves.
It does.
But I can kind of relate in that sense. So anyway, but what is it about being a punk rocker in Nebraska that I don't know, introduced you to some of what you've now written about collaboration?
And you can go back to the endeavor conversation about that. So imagine, if you will, it's 1979 or 1980. You've picked up a guitar for the first time and you're listening to a Ramones album or something. And you say, I want to do that. And you're in the middle of Nebraska. Okay. So you're in the wrong place at the right time. And so we had to do a variety of things. We had to learn how to play our instruments. We had to learn how to work together to make coherent songs and products. We had to learn how to produce things. So like actually the production of something. So you can't just, play into a tape recorder and make an album out of it. It doesn't work that way. So we had to figure, like, how do 14-year-olds get into a recording studio? How do we make an EP or a single or an album? Once we do those things, how do we get those distributed to New York and Paris and Berlin? How do we get people to review stuff? And what we didn't realize at the time, because we're just a bunch of hicks from the middle of Nebraska who's going to listen to us. What we didn't realize was that the rest of the world was like, oh, cool, it's a bunch of hicks from Nebraska, we should listen to that. We didn't get that at the time. We absolutely did not figure out what our most sellable thing was. But we had to learn at a very early age, how do we set up, run a business? How do we build a market where there isn't one? And we did all of those things. We didn't realize the lessons we were learning at the time. But by the time I got into the lean or the startup world, all of those became a thing. And if you go back right now and you talk to any any ex-punk rocker about what the experience was like, they're not going to say, I did this and I did that and I did this and I did that. It was all about the we.
Yeah.
You couldn't be a punk alone. You know, that, I guess that's a goth. but you know, slam dancing by yourself is basically just Fight Club in your bedroom. So
yeah, fair enough. Well, I like you kind of distill it where you sort of recognize that often a scene like that, well, that specific scene, but perhaps others get referred to as DIY cultures when do it yourself. When perhaps DIT, do it together. Would be really a better way to sort of characterize that culture. So I guess one thing that I wanted to maybe have you describe and then elaborate on, and then I've got some perhaps follow-up questions on it. So right there, smack in the middle of the book, chapter 5 of the 9-chapter book. So sort of right at the heart of it, right at the core of it, you take the reader through something you call the right environment exercise. And in that, at that time in the book really kind of transforms into a workbook. I mean, it gets really like practical in this thing, while at the same time, as you point out repeatedly, it's not prescriptive. It's a sort of practical workbook that's not prescriptive. But anyway, perhaps you could kind of walk us through what is the right environment exercise, kind of the 4 steps, and then perhaps I'll have some questions for that.
Okay. So a right environment is an environment where professionals can behave professionally. So by design, and I use that word intentionally, design, it has agency, it has psychological safety, it has the information that people need when they need it in order to get their work done. When we're working on an assembly line, there isn't a lot of new information that you need while assembling something. But in knowledge work, you need new information all the time because it's just coming up all the time.
Well, just to point out, sorry to interrupt, just to point out, I thought that this was a helpful description of perhaps the difference between like manufacturing environments and I guess knowledge work environments that you provide in the book. In particular, the distance and time between kind of the design phase of the product service and the sort of production or making phase. And that in a manufacturing environment, those are quite far apart from one another in time. But in knowledge work, those two things are like completely intermixed, right?
They're totally conjoined,
present all the time. Anyway,
and that was what was so fascinating about working with Turner, because at Turner, you start the project and you get a bunch of plans to build this skyscraper,
right?
But those plans literally change every day during the course of the project. And then it's just kind of like, it's this weird evolution of a final product that just happens to be 60 stories tall and made out of steel.
Right.
So, I also talk in the book about, like, at one point we were working with Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket company, and we were sitting there working with a designer who then hit a button, 3D printed a titanium part, and then went and plugged it into the rocket. So with manufacturing 3.0, this distinction is becoming less and less important day by day.
Right.
But we wanted Turner, you'd think that each construction project would be the same, that they would have a lot of standard work for that. But what Turner really does is like a constant crisis mitigation machine. And so they're always in constant negotiation between owners and tradespeople and so forth about what to do. High stress, high stakes. Buildings are worth over $1 billion. So when we set up a right environment for people to be able to make decisions, those decisions have real consequences. And I work with tons of companies where the decisions have almost no consequences and people aren't allowed to make them. So you can't get them wrong and they still can't act. So the right environment exercise itself is you start off initially and we do a value stream mapping exercise. It'll look kind of like what everybody is familiar with, but we're focusing on the relationships between the people who are doing the work, the teams that are interacting while the work's being done, where decisions are being made, where information is being lost. So it's not just the flow of the work, but it's also the flow of the information, the flow of the decision making, and the ability or points where you can identify a problem or an issue and then be able to engage in some sort of mitigation. When that happens, since almost no companies are set up collaboratively, you end up with 1,000 red, this doesn't work right, sticky notes in there. And that becomes quite emotional. So we start people off in this situation where they feel like they're just mapping their work. And by the time they're done, they're like, oh, whoa, work is made of people. And I'm one of them. And I'm not the only one who's screwed over, and I'm screwing over other people every day. That's embarrassing. So we do that. Then 2 is what we call a charter. And the charter, we do 4 consecutive exercises, but those 4 exercises are, the goal of that is to get the team to identify what they need as professionals to get their work done. So we get them to identify what their team actually does, what they can expect from each other, how they work together and with other teams. And, if they were done right away, how would that look? And those things together generate enough conversations that when combined with the value stream mapping exercise allows people to go back and forth and say, I see where we can fix a few of these things. And often those fixes are, wow, we should stop doing that. So it isn't like a whole huge, A3 thing. It's literally like people saying, whoa, that's dumb. Let's not do that anymore. The third part of it is a communications agreement, because anyone who is watching this right now knows that if you needed to get some information right now from your company, you would go look in email and Slack and Google Docs and like 55 other places. And ultimately what would end up happening is you would ask someone else on your team, where the hell is the blank? That is of epidemic proportions for most teams. So we want to clear that up so that people can have more capacity to deal with their work. So right now, the people before us were saying, we routinely will pull like 60% of waste out of companies that we're working with. Mm-hmm. That's where about 50% of it lives. just losing stuff and getting into Slack saying, where is the blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
We take all of that information, and as we're going along through those, this is just 4 days to do those things. As we're going through those things, we're going through and we're gathering information for what are the key elements of your culture? What are the key things that you want to fix? How are you going to become a culture of continuous improvement? And how are you going to maintain that culture? And we'll usually come up with a handful of, maybe we'll say 24 things that they could do. We'll fold that into a very workable roadmap. And then we will start to build the muscle of becoming a collaborative team. And a collaborative team doesn't mean you just work well with each other, but you also work well with other parts of the company, design, marketing, etc. We make sure that everyone sees the collaborative framework that they are in, so that they stop doing things like blaming other people for interruptions, for extra work, etc.
Sure. Okay. Here comes the ship, Jim.
I see the ship.
This is part of our key. Well, look, I mean, just want to say, I think the book is really beautifully written. It does provide a practical approach to this challenge of collaboration, which certainly we all face day in and day out. Just a few acknowledgments on the comments real quick. Thanks everyone for wishing me a happy birthday. I don't know who put it up there that today's my birthday, but it is. Thank you for the well wishes. Hi, Brother Dave. Brother Dave, I've heard a lot about you, but we've not met. I see you're there. Nice to meet you. And then John Shook sort of gave his endorsement there. Really good book.
Oh, thanks, John.
Without being prescriptive. So, hi, John.
Hi, John.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate
You're
the
welcome.
time. Good to see you again. Can't wait to see you in the flesh. It's been since 2019, but someday soon. Probably over a beer in Seattle. How's that sound?
Yeah, and I believe that the that you've got you're gonna hit the button and then it electrocutes me and then I go away. This is a very
Guys.
dystopian moment for me. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you so much for your time.
Bye bye. Perfect.